Um, okay. Uh, the word ahi is, I mean, it means brother in the Arabic language. In Turkey, we don't use ahi word in daily life. In Turkish, when we use ahi, it only refers a medieval brotherhood or order. Um, uh, there are some discussions or arguments about the origin of the word. Ahi means brother in Arabic, but also means akı, which means the giving hand or a generosity in the Old Turkish. So it was a guild, like any other guilds in the world in the medieval times. In the 13th century, it was founded in Anatolia, but this movement was quite different from other Islamic mystic branches or Sufi movements. Because their perception of work was different from other mystic schools. They are not only guilds, they are also a mystic order and sometimes a military order, like Knights Templar in the Christian Europe. And they even deal with some social issues, education, healthcare. The history of the movement is in the 13th century, but the origins of the movement goes before this date. So when we talk about Islamic ethic or Islamic work ethic, first of all, we should mention some Islamic concepts for the non-Islamic audience. First of all, there are some principles in Islamic business ethics. This Ahi movement, this medieval order, they were merchants and craft persons or some kind of other professions and living in cities. They were not peasants. So their ethic was also a medieval business ethics. But before that, we should mention some dimensions of Islamic business ethics. The first one, of course, is the principle of unity, tawhid. It reflects integrity and discipline in social, political, and the religious spheres of life. And the other one is equilibrium, muwazene, or balance. It's related with the concept of justice and reflects a balance in various dimensions of life. And the other principle is free will, hurriya. The humankind was created as a stewardship of Allah in its world. Khalifatullah, the Khalifa or stewards of Allah is important here. And the free will gives a unique opportunity to humankind to separate good from evil. Another principle is responsibility, mas'uliyah. Responsibility is the direct result of free will. Human beings have responsibilities for their actions. And the last one is benevolence, ihsan. It reflects charity and philanthropic activities based on altruism. And Ahi brothers also support these principles, and they have actually nearly 740 principles, and these principles were also can be seen among these principles. We should also mention some Islamic terms. For instance, Tawheed, it's a belief in the unity of God, belief in one God. And the Khalifa is the successor and the steward of God. Non-Muslims only hear that word, Khalifa, from the some terrorist organization or the old Islamic caliphs or empires, but it means that every human beings are Khalifa, which means steward of God in the world. And the Sharia means Islamic religious law, and Sharia is a medieval Islamic law. Nowadays, in some countries, they use a kind of Sharia, but you can see different kinds, different sorts of Sharia practices in the world. And the fatwa is a non-binding legal opinion, a point of Islamic law, and given by a qualified jurist in the response to a question posed by a private individual, judge, or government. For instance, you can ask whether smoking is okay in Islamic belief system or permissible. A fatwa giver can investigate the issue, and he can say whether it is permissible or not, or he can issue some other comments. And the riba is a usual or biting interest rate. It is forbidden in the Sharia law. Iman means faith, and the Salih Amal means good acts, and Ibadah means praying, worship. Ahlak means ethics in Arabic, and Taqwa means spirituality with integrity. Spirituality with integrity. When we look at Islamic work ethic, the main, what is the main core of Islamic work ethic, we can see that it is based on hard work. The Islamic work ethic, it is similar to Jewish ethic, and very different from the pagan, Roman, and Greek ethics, because they didn't value work. They saw work, they perceived work as a slavery duty, the job of slaves. So Islamic work ethic doesn't differ considerably, since the root comes from an Abrahamic root, doesn't differ considerably from Protestant and Catholic work ethic, since it shares the same Semitic heritage. Like Christianity, Islam sees work as a worship and service to God. It also shares the contribution of human work to God's creation. All human beings are considered as caliphs or successors of God on earth, which is similar to the idea of stewardship or co-creating in Christianity. We can also ask whether Islamic work ethic is communitarian or individualist. As Turner pointed out, the origin of modern individualism comes from both secular ideologies and certain Protestant movements. Although it is not anti-individualistic or collectivistic in its theology, Islam didn't play a contributory role in the development of modern individualism as Calvinism did. And also, although Islam has some individualistic elements in its original message, the centralized power in Islamic empires, which prevented the growth of autonomous cities as in feudal Europe, and other worldly Sufism, diminished individualistic elements in everyday religion. when we look at the attitudes or Islamic attitudes towards wealth, money, and the time, the Muslim attitude towards wealth, money, and time are more or less similar to the Protestant and Catholic positions. The only difference emerged from the prohibition of usury. There's a strict ban on any kind of usury in Islam, while Protestant and Catholic Christianity permit a reasonable rate of interest, but there are also arguments in the Islamic world what type of interest can be taken as riba, or whether we can accept or take all types of interest rates as riba. This is a questionable issue among the Islamic scholars. What is the base of Ahi movement or Ahi order in the medieval Anatolia? When we go back to the history, the Turkish tribes and Turkish people started to immigrate and settle down in Anatolia after the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. The Byzantine Empire or East Roman Empire was defeated in the town of Manzikert in the eastern Anatolia, where I was born actually, very near to that town. After this battle, the Roman Empire lost its authority in the Asian provinces or Anatolian provinces, and the Turkish tribes came settled in the area, and they founded their own state, which was called the Roman Seljuk state. It was a vassal state of the Great Seljuk Empire. And these Anatolian Seljuks or Roman Seljuks, they were new people in the land and with a new language and with a new religion. Native Anatolian people were Christians, Greek-speaking Christians, and the Armenian-speaking Christians. And these Christians people also, they were also the ancient or native people of Anatolia who were assimilated into Greek culture by the conquest of the Alexander the Great. So when the Turkish tribes came to Anatolia, they were in a situation that there were many educated and well-educated crafts, well-trained crafts merchants, and the city dwellers was in Anatolia, and most of them, the Turkish tribes, were uneducated peasants and the shepherds. But there are also some people immigrated from very civilized Turkish cities from Central Asia, like Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Balkh, the Central Asian cities now, mostly in Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. And they wanted to organize this uneducated masses into a civilized society. So they decided that ethics is very necessary as a social coherent social bound for these people, and these people, they also wanted to compare with the Christian people of Anatolia. So there was a need to educate them, to improve them, and empower them. So some scholars came from Central Asia, and they organized a movement. They founded a movement in Anatolia. It was a religious but also professional movement called Ahi Movement. And the Turkish people, when they came to Anatolia, their enemies were not Christian people of Anatolia. And we didn't have any war or religious war. There were, of course, battles and wars between Roman Empire and the Turkish states, Seljuk states, but there were no, war or massacres, as we know, between the Turkish tribes and the local people, because there was a cooperation between these people. Of course, there was some competition at that time, but Anatolia was mostly an empty place because of civil wars and other hard times. Most people immigrated to big cities, and the Turkish tribes came and settled down towns, and they founded new villages in the empty areas. So Mahmut Nasreddin el-Hoyi from the Azerbaijan, his real name, the Ahi Evran Veli, he came to Anatolia, and he started to organize Anatolian people. Ahi movement, organized an Ahi movement, brotherhood, Ahi brotherhood, and he used ancient Fütüvet order. So what is Fütüvet order? Fütüvet order was different from Ahi movement. It was founded between 1182 by the Abbasi Caliph Nasir Lidinillah. It was a knighthood with strong ethical codes known as Fütüvetname, and they were very similar to Knights Templar. We can say that they were Muslim Knights Templar, but they were not merchants or professional people. They were just cavaliers or chevalier in French. They were protecting the weak, and if there is a oppression from the strong people, from the powerful people, against the poor, against the weak, and they were here to protect them and to stop illegal or unnecessary force of strong people in society. So they were keeping the balance in this society and acting as a kind of law force. But this society was a secret society. This knighthood, Fütüvet knighthood, was a secret society. But it was supported by the government, by the state at that time. But in the 13th century, there was no Fütüvet order 300 years later. But this movement, Fütüvet movement, when they were acting actively, they issued some codes of conduct or codes of ethical principles, which were known as Fütüvetname in Arabic. Actually, it was a mixed word with Arabic and Persian. Name means letter, and Fütüvet means knighthood or bravery, because feta means brave and Fütüvet means bravery, and the Fütüvetname means codes of bravery. So these codes were still available at the time of Ahi Veli. He came to Anatolia and he organized people against Mongolian invaders because all Turkish Oghuz tribes were escaping before Mongolian invaders. The Mongol armies were massacring people and persecuting people, and the big Turkish cities were fallen down to this Mongolian armies, and even they came to Anatolia, but they had battle with the Seljuk state, and the Seljuk state was they defeated Seljuk state in the Battle of Köse Dağı, and the Seljuk state became a vassal or puppet of the Mongolians. So the people, local people, both Christians and Muslim people, were suffering from the bad behaviors and the persecution of Mongol armies. And this Ahi movement was a protecting force, keeping people in a safe haven in small towns like Ankara, Kırşehir, Yozgat, Kayseri, and they started to fight even against this Mongolian armies, and they because they were no governmental army or police organization, and they decided to found their own military units, paramilitary units, because there were no state power around, and especially in Ankara and Kırşehir, they organized military units to fight against Mongolians. And it is very interesting that they also organized female fighters, and it was called Bacıyane Rum. Bacı means sister in Turkish, and this Bacıyane Rum was fully equipped knights, female knights, and so these were also fighting against the Mongols. Even the wife and the sister of Ahi Evran, one of the female commanders of this military units, and the Ahi Evran's wife Fatma Hatun was also personally fighting against the Mongols, and became a war of prisoner of a war, and she escaped later on. And here you see this is a real Fütüvvetname, a written ethical code in the 13th century. My friends, in the 13th century, Turkish people of Anatolia has got their business ethics codes. And a Fütüvvetname was a medieval code of conduct explaining noble and ethical behaviors at work and the daily life in Muslim countries. But the difference between a modern code of conduct and a Fütüvvetname, in Fütüvvetname you can see many unrelated issues. It was not also only a business ethics document, but you can see some principles about how to eat properly in a social event, how to eat your meal in the dining table, how to drink your water or drink properly, and how to use proper phrase when you talk. It was also promoting noble behaviors in the society, and trying to create a noble and elegant society, which was also a part of the Islamic ethics, because in Islamic ethics, all Muslim people has to be has some principles and attributes that can be pleasant for the other Muslims or other even non-Muslims. So when we look at the origins of Ahi movement, my friends, the first origin comes from Abbasi Caliphate, the Fituwet order, as I mentioned before. But the other origin comes from the East Roman collegias, because people of Anatolia, for the people of Anatolia, the Ahi Brotherhood and its principles and the Fitvetnames were not alien cultural elements, because in the Roman Empire we know that they had similar guilds and their codes. When we look at the Roman collegias, and the guilds were called collegia. The word of college comes from this word, collegia. And the first Roman workers organized into guilds. Numa Pompilius, he was the second king of Rome, organizes Roman workers into various collegia. He attaches one to each legion of the army so that Roman arms and arts go hand in hand into the outlying parts of the empire. The stone workers or masons are the most numerous because of their use in defense works, and so become the most powerful. Each collegia has at least 3 members. They use their tools as symbols and they look after the widows and the orphans of members. This was also seen in Ahi Brotherhood. Ahi Brotherhood was a social order. When a member dies, the order used to protect the orphans of the member and the widow wives of the member financially and emotionally. They used to support them because there was a financial institution in the Ahi Brotherhood, which is called Orta Sandığı in Turkish. The translation is the middle box, or box in the middle. And each profession person or craft has to give a small amount of his income into this box every day. And if there is a need to support a weak, a needy, a sick, or person who need education, primary education, and they use this common money to support the other people. It was a solidarity between them. Even they lent money to the other members from this Orta Sandığı. And this Orta Sandık, during the history, comes to the recent days. Even this middle box became a trust and financial trust. And during the Republic, it became a commercial bank now, which is Halkbank in Turkey, the Bank of People. Halkbank comes from the this middle box of Ahi Brotherhood, and I was also a financial analyst of that bank when I started my first profession after graduation in Turkey. And when we look at Ahi ethic, they were like Puritan Protestants, very similar. They believe that work and profession are blessed activities to please God, to please Allah. So if you look at Puritan ethics of Calvinists, we will see the similar ethical principle. Ahi is an Arabic word, and as I mentioned, and the Turkish word Ahi only refers to medieval brotherhood and its members. An Ahi is a person who is a member of Ahi brotherhood. The term of Ahilik means Ahi organization or Ahi movement in Turkish. Yes, the Ahi religious order was established, as we said, by the Anatolian Turks in the 13th century. The Ahi institution was a kind of guild organization which organized and controlled all commercial, cultural, educational, and sometimes military activities in the Turkish society. The Ahi movement was not only an economic organization, but also Muslim religious order, follows the ancient Futuhat order's principle as it is moral basis. Evet, this man, the statue of course, symbolic statue of him, the Ahi Evran Veli, he was a Turkish scholar, was born in today's Azerbaijan in 1171 and immigrated to Anatolia. He was a theologian and a philosopher and a good follower of Farabi and Avicenna. In addition to its economic and religious aspects, the Ahi organizations also had some kind of military functions, especially during invasion periods. Military branches of Ahi organizations were composed of male and female military units, as I mentioned. Male military units of Ahi organization were called Gaziyan Rum, Knights of Roman land, or Anatolia, Roman Knights. And the female military units were called Baciyan Rum, which can be translated as the Roman sisters. Roman means a person from land of Roman Empire, mostly refers to Anatolia. And Ahi order was an economic, religious, and a military organization which had Turkish business and a work ethic in the medieval times. The Ahi order contributed to the Turkish settlement of Anatolia and development of Turkish moral values during the 13th century. They have their own code of conducts, ethical principles that shape Turkish commercial culture in the region, and its ethical effects can be traced in modern Turkish small business today. Ahi spirit and principles of Ahi movements has many common roots with the modern business ethics. Ahi spirit strongly encourages work ethic. Ahi people do not believe in personal salvation through an isolated, otherworldly asceticism. But some other Sufi orders at that time, they had their own Islamic monasteries, which is called dergah, and Islamic monks, which is called dervish. And this monastic life was an isolated life, like Orthodox monks in the Byzantine Empire, because they were acting, imitating. They were imitating the Orthodox people and their religious life. Even we have common or very similar religious ritual with Orthodox Greek people here in Anatolia. And this kind of traditions, most are even pre-Christian. It comes from before Christianity, pagan times, like some rituals in the funerals, or some rituals for the newborn babies. This kind of things can be seen very similar in Orthodox religion and the Islam in Turkey. Yes, when we look at Christian ethics, especially Protestants, we can see some similarities between Ahi ethic, because Protestants have this worldly asceticism, pleasing God with our works, and they have also an unmediated direct relation of the individual to the sacred, which is a religious individualism. And the Ahis were like that. and the doctrine of calling of Luther. Luther says every Christian has a calling from God, and it is his profession. If your father is a peasant, you should be a peasant. You follow your father's way. If your father is a merchant, you should be a merchant. It's like that. But Calvin has a different view on this issue, and he had doctrine of predestination. Doctrine of predestination says that only a determined amount of people will be saved, and it is determined before the world created. That's the predestination belief. And PWE or PWE, Protestant work ethic, has some dimensions. When we look at these dimensions, we can also say many Ahi principles are similar to this Protestant work ethic. For instance, taking hard work and industriousness as religious duties, and the negative attitude to leisure activities, and the frugality and productivity, punctuality and the time saving, and the pride in work, they can all be seen in Ahi ethic. And commitment and loyalty to occupation and organization, need for achievement, honesty, taking idleness, wasting time and the money as vices, internal locus of control, taking ambition and success as a sign of God's favor, and taking poverty as a universal indicator of sin, while taking wealth as a sign of God's favor. This cannot be seen in Ahi movement, because Ahi movement and Islamic ethic doesn't value richness so much. Also, there are other principles in Protestant movements: viewing wealth as a major goal in life, viewing leisure as earned by work, viewing success in work as a resulting primarily from the amount of personal effort, viewing wealth that results from work as a sign of God's favor. But we don't say that all Protestant movements has got this kind of ethics. These were the Puritan ethics of the 16th century or 17th century, and of course it's changed in the modern times. We can't see any Protestant movement that wealth is a major goal in life, because they changed during the history. Eisenstein, scholar, emphasizes the transformative role of Protestant ethic. This is an indirect effect of Protestantism on capitalism, and it shows the transformative capacities of Protestantism in three factors. First, this worthiness and transcendentalism. Secondly, individual activism and responsibility. And the thirdly, an unmediated direct relationship of the individual to the sacred. These are the Protestants. If we go and look at the Catholic ethic, after the Vatican Council, Vatican II Council, I think it was 1963, a new doctrine erased from the Catholic Church, which is called Catholic social teaching. And the modern Catholic social teaching is based on a tradition of papal, conciliar, and episcopal documents. To summarize it, I took the 7 principles of Catholic social doctrine, CST, are commonly accepted as in the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And the one is life and dignity of the human person. They took some phrases from the papal encyclicals, for instance, Pacem in Terris and the Laborum Exercens, and they say Catholics believe that human person made in the image of God, and so having fundamental freedom and the dignity, the basis for the human rights. And the 2, call to family, community, and the participation. And if we see that the family orientedness can also be seen in the Islamic and the Ahi movement, and also the first one, the dignity of human beings, was one of the fütüve principle in Islam and the Ahi movement. And the Catholics believe that people have a right and a duty to participate in society, seeking together the common good and the well-being of all, especially the poor and the vulnerable. So this participation in society and this solidarity actions can also was also a very important part of Ahi movement. Rights and responsibilities. The Catholic tradition teaches that human dignity can be protected and a healthy community can be achieved only if human rights are protected and the responsibilities are met. So, of course, in the 13th century, there were no human rights in the world, but human dignity was important. Yeah, poor and vulnerable, option for the poor and vulnerable. The most vulnerable members of society should be under protection of wealthy believers. This is important. And as I mentioned about Orta Sandık or the middle box, middle box was the tool, a very functional tool to support poor of the society by the wealthy believers. And so we can see the very same principle as in the fourth point of Catholic social doctrine. The five, the dignity of work and the rights of workers. If the dignity of work is to be protected, then the basic rights of workers must be respected. The rights to productive work, to decent and fair wage, to the organization and the joining of unions, to private property and to economic initiative. Pope Leo 23rd issued in a papal encyclical called Rerum Novarum in 1891, and this document was very important document for Catholic societies. It was a document against socialist idea and against capitalistic exploitation of the workers and the children workers, underage workers and the female workers. And solidarity, everyone are responsible for all. This is a very holistic view in Catholicism, and in particular, the rich have responsibilities towards the poor. National and international structure must reflect this faith, and we see that Archaism has the same principle. And the care for God's creation. This is an environmentalist dimension of the CSD. Catholics show their respect for the Creator by their stewardship of creation. Care for the earth is not just an Earth Day slogan. It's a requirement of Catholic faith. They are called to protect people and the planet, living their faith and relationship with all of God's creation. And these are old principles that we mentioned. And also Saint Benedict, he founded the Benedictine monasteries and Benedictine order. And his motto was ora et labora, which means work and prayer. And prayer and work was the Ahi slogan, Ahi motto as well. So when we look at Ahi Code of Conducts, just some example I'm giving: be a member of a recognized profession, take hard work as a holy principle of life, be fair to others in your actions, do not commit any discrimination, show hospitality to your guests, do not search faults of others, follow the general ethical principle of society, be kind and gentle to others, be generous to everyone, control your sexuality, avoid gossiping, show forgiveness to others. You know, these are 700 principles they have, And when we look at Ahi tradition and Protestantism, individual responsibility and the hard-working aspects of Ahi ethic are very close to the Protestant work ethic. From a Weberian point of view, like Calvinist Puritanism, Ahi ethic involves a kind of otherworldly asceticism. And Ahi movement doesn't seek salvation in an isolated monastic life, but salvation through belief, work, and profession. In this sense, they were close to Lutherans with the concept of calling, or Beruf in German, and to Calvinist Puritans with this worldly asceticism. And Ahi tradition as a faith and work integration, as we look at how can we integrate work and faith in the workplace. Can modern business organization be benefited from this Ahi ethic today? We can easily answer the question with a big yes. Although Ahi movement was a medieval Muslim order, a modern business organization in the United States, in Canada, in Mexico, in Europe, in Africa, in Japan, in Singapore, in China, can easily adopt and implement its values as values and principles. Because, as you said, they were mostly universal. People do not have to be practicing wisdom to use Ahi principles in business life. Modern business organizations employ people from different ethnic and religious backgrounds. When we look at how people behave at work, their behavior were determined by their attitudes, and their attitudes determined by their values. So we should look at values. In this figure, we can see that there can be F. This F are different faiths or different religious movements, and they can have their different values, V2, V3, V4, but they will also have common values like V1, V2, V3, and these common values will produce common attitudes and also a common work behavior in the workplace. It is expected. You can be either a Muslim or a Christian or an atheist or a deist or a spiritual believer, but we can have common values and behaviors if we want to integrate the faith and the word in the workplace. As a conclusion, I can say people need more humanitarian workplace, responsible production, responsible consumption, fair trade, fair wages, less exploitation, less environmental pollution. Even after the pandemic, these kind of needs are becoming more crucial. They all need respect for their dignity and the way of life. We can argue that Ahi ethic offers solutions to the problems of capitalism. A well-known Ahi maxim can give us a good example of how can Ahi ethic be implemented in modern organization. It says, watch your hands, watch your jantas, and watch your tongue. Most of ethical problems arise in the organizations as a result of violations of this maxim. Corruption, sexual harassment, mobbing, nepotism are direct results of the lack of such virtues. One do not have to be a Muslim or to be a medieval Ahi brother or sister in order to implement these noble principles in his or her life. In conclusion, both Ahi ethic and Christian ethic make some ethical suggestions to minimize harmful practices of modern capitalism. Our analysis also showed that Christians and Muslims can work together for a better workplace and a better business practices using Christian and the Ahi principles as a common ethical basis. Thank you for listening to me.
All right. Well, I really appreciate that, Dr. Arslan. Thank you for your presentation. And so now we're going to open the floor to questions. If y'all have a question about the Ahi